Good morning. It's a warm day, isn't it? But it beats the East Coast. So welcome everyone to the dedication of Ellis Auditorium. First, let me mention the district policy on masks. Indoor masking is required. Outdoor masking is strongly recommended, particularly in crowded outdoor spaces when waiting in line, etc. This day has been long in the making, and as usual, there are many people to thank. First, I would like to thank the Lawndale Elementary School District Board of Trustees, who graciously agreed to name this auditorium after Mr. Ellis. We do have one board member present today, Trustee Kathy Burris, if you would stand and be recognized. Also, I would like to thank Superintendent Dr. Betsy Hamilton and thank Dr. Hamilton and her staff for helping planning this dedication. Representing her today is Deputy Superintendent Dr. Gretchen Jansen. Dr. Jansen, if you would take a stand. There she is. Also in attendance today and part of the staff is Dr. Daniel Uriditia. If you would stand, please. Jim Osborne, former Lawndale City Council member, are you here today? If you would stand. There you are. Thank you. And finally, I'd like to thank all of you who donated to make this day possible. Clinton, Leonard, Pete, Ellis. I hope I don't cry. Was a remarkable man who touched many lives. He was a teacher, a coach, and mentor who guided thousands of youth through adolescence. He spent 50 years of his life teaching in Lawndale and 25 of those years here at Roosevelt. Upon his passing last year, scores of accolades poured in, testifying to the importance he played in so many lives. Let me share just a few of the highlights from Mr. Ellis' life so maybe you can see what formed this man. He was born in Kansas City, Missouri in 1924 and raised most of his life in St. Louis. At the age of 7, during the start of the Great Depression, he got his first job selling newspapers for 10 cents a day. This was necessary because his parents were divorced and his father was out of work like so many men were. He spent some time in orphan homes because his parents could not support him. In the 8th grade, he made some good friends. Wouldn't you know it, they were guys that liked to joke and entertain each other. So one day they decided to give each other nicknames. He got the nickname Pete McGillicuddy. Well, the Pete part stuck. He used that ever since. During World War II, Mr. Ellis enlisted in the Army Air Corps 2 weeks after graduating from high school. He flew 32 B-17 bombing missions over Nazi Germany. As the anti-aircraft bombs were exploding around his airplane, he would tell jokes to try to lighten the mood. Isn't that typical Mr. Ellis? Always joking, always smiling, always making you feel good. Many of you know that much of the Netherlands is below sea level. And I think, did we lose our mic? And dikes have been built to reclaim some of the land for farming. During World War II, the Nazis bombed those dikes, which destroyed the crops. And about 1,000 people a day were starving. So Mr. Ellis was taken off bombing duty and put on missions of mercy, dropping food to the Dutch. He can remember looking out and seeing the people, their faces, their desperation. On one mission, his job was to be in the belly of the plane and push out gunny sacks of food. The last gunny sack got stuck on a cable, and he had to give it a big kick to get it to drop. When he did, he slipped and fell, and nearly fell out of the plane. He grabbed a cable at the nick of time. He tried and tried to pull himself up, but with the wind going past underneath the plane so fast he couldn't get up. He yelled for help, but there was too much noise in the plane. No one could hear him. Then to make matters worse, the bomb bay doors started to close. When the doors got within 1 inch of his body, they stopped. And then he was able to pull himself up, get out of that predicament. He immediately went to the intercom and said, "Thank you to the pilot for stopping the doors." And the pilot said, "I didn't stop the doors." He thanked the co-pilot. He didn't stop the doors. Navigator? No, he didn't stop the doors. Perhaps it was divine providence. And we are the beneficiaries of him surviving that day. When Mr. Ellis was discharged from the military, his foster father wanted him to go in business with him repairing cars. But Mr. Ellis said, "No, I want to go to college." He entered Washington University in St. Louis, majored in education with an emphasis on PE. He became quite involved in college extracurricular activities. He was on the cross-country team. Does that surprise anybody? He joined the staff of the school paper. He joined the drama club. He became involved with student council. These experiences of his paid huge dividends for our school. What dividends? Well, Mr. Ellis was the founder of the Roosevelt school newspaper. He founded the drama club and produced and directed dozens of plays in this very auditorium. He founded the Roosevelt Student Council. He obviously was one to share his talents. Many of us remember Mr. Ellis as an inspiration when it came to athletics. He led by example. He became a lifelong runner at the age of 10. He actually won medals in 5K races at the age of 85. 85. I wish I could do that. Many of you remember him riding his bicycle for miles throughout our neighborhoods. He worked as a program director at Parks and Rec for many years, and he coached girls basketball until late in life. Finally, I would like to thank the Ellis family for sharing Pete for us these 50 years. Prior to the marriage of Mr. and Mrs. Ellis, Pat asked Pete, "How many children would you like to have?" Pete thought for a while and said, "Well, 4 is a good number." And then Pete asked Pat, "How many would you like to have?" And she said, "I'd like to have 6. So they compromised and had 8. Pat is here today along with all 8 of her children. We have with us today Ellis's great-granddaughters Emery and Elizabeth, and they will present flowers to their great-grandmother. Mrs. Ellis, on behalf of the thousands of students taught by Mr. Ellis over 50 years, we would like to present these flowers to you as a remembrance of his dedication to Roosevelt and his caring for students. I would now like to present Bill Ellis, son of Pete, for some thoughts on his dad.
Thanks, Mike. I think you hacked my computer and got my speech. I'm gonna have to modify my goodness, great job. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This is wonderful seeing so many friends, neighbors, my dad's friends, my friends, family members who've come out from so far. I thank you so much. Excuse me. Sorry, excuse me, sorry. But I'd like to thank everybody for coming out today to honor my dad, Clinton Pete Ellis. What was that? Hold on. Yeah. Okay, Matilda. Sure. I know. Okay. So I want to introduce Matilda Garbage Can. This was a little prop that my dad used to use in the classroom to get the attention of his students. And I think it's crazy, zany antics like that we all love about my dad and what his students grew to love about him. It was things like that. Matilda Garbage Can, one of his signature characters. Special thanks. A lot of people went into organizing this. Lots of communications, lots of Zoom meetings. And definitely want to thank Mike Miller here for what he's done organizing this event. Al Goodman, very, very instrumental in this event. Bonnie Coronado, thank you. Lawndale School Board, members of the superintendent's staff. And my sisters Becky and Julie were very involved, taking over for the family part of getting this organized. Thank you so much. I'm going to share some of my memories of my dad and some of the stories that my dad shared, minus the ones that Mike already told you. Maybe I'll try to add to them. You all may remember things differently, and that's fine. And you have your own very special memories. I just hope that what I say brings back your own fond memories of my dad. So, who was Clinton Pete Ellis? Well, there's so many reasons why it's amazing that he became the person that we all remember. I better be careful here. He had so many odds against him, as Mike had talked about, growing up during the Depression. He actually spent time in orphanages. His mom passed when he was very young, parents divorced prior to that. Even suffered some abuse, unfortunately, at orphanages and so forth. And wasn't the best childhood until about 10 years old, 11 years old, when he was taken in by his foster family. And just by the grace of God, his dad, out of work, was going to start like riding the trains and just going from town to town looking for work. And he was going to take my dad with him. And Rosa Avasart, Nona, said, no. He's staying here. He's staying with us. And I think that was kind of like the changing point. That's where my dad got his mojo and his great outlook on life. He finally had someone who wanted him and gave him security. His sense of humor developed there while being raised by the foster family. During social gatherings, he used to tell jokes to Nona's friends, and they would give him a nickel for telling jokes. And it's there where he earned the nickname Sonny. And it wasn't S-O-N-N-Y, it was S-U-N-N-Y. And that's because of the ray of sunshine that he brought to all of them. Mike talked about his middle school friends. That's where he met his best buddy Butch, who was his friend for life. And yes, got his nickname Pete, which stuck with him, Pete McGillicuddy. My dad was a St. Louis Cardinal fan to the max. Oh my God. My sister even had the nerve this year when the Dodgers were playing the Cardinals. She would put his urn, which is a St. Louis Cardinal urn, in front of the TV and then send us all a text message with it there. And I said, the Cardinals don't need any more help. But anyway, his love for the Cardinals, it started when he was a kid. He was a member of, I believe they were called the Knothole Gang. So they would hang out by the fence in the back of the stadium, and there'd be knotholes in the fence, and they'd look through the holes to watch the game for free. And fortunately, sometimes towards the end of the game, the guards would let him in for the last couple innings. So his love for baseball grew from there. His foster brother was a professional baseball player, played for both the St. Louis Browns and St. Louis Cardinals organizations as well. Mike talked a lot about his Army experience, and shared some really great stories. When I was in college, I interviewed my dad, and it was the first time I really learned a lot of things about him. And rather than going into all the stories, one of the things that really hit me was, I asked my dad about his friendships while he was in the service, and he said it was really hard to make friends because you would be worried that they wouldn't be there tomorrow. And that was the type of mentality you had to live with when you were in wartime service. And it's just amazing how the things that he went through, that he could have his sense of humor. So after the war, going to Washington University, very prestigious university, Mike mentioned that he majored in education. Well, originally he actually majored in engineering. He was a flight engineer for the Army Air Corps. And he took an aptitude test while he was in college. And that aptitude test suggested that he should be a teacher. And he switched and changed his mind. So thank God for that aptitude test, right? I couldn't imagine my dad being an engineer. I remember days he'd be going off to work in his suit, and he'd turn around and head out the door, and I'd look and he'd have his pajamas hanging out of his suit. Like, Dad, you forgot to take your pajamas off. I said, oh no, I'm cold. I want to keep them on. So, but my absent-minded dad, and like Mike said, riding his bike, many mornings he'd be riding his bike to work, and sometimes he would ride his bike, he'd forget he rode his bike, he would run home, and then he'd get home, go, oh, I need my bike for tomorrow, and then he'd run back to school, get his bike, right? So that's my zany dad. Some of the things we remember a lot are his jokes, some of his corny jokes. Some of his favorite ones are like, did you hear the one about the red pepper? Well, it's a hot one. Or the horse that sits down in a bar and the bartender goes up to him and says, why such long face? And then, of course, all the blonde jokes, and he would claim innocence because my dad was a little towhead when he grew up as well. So, and he used to love to tell his blonde jokes, and he loved to hear jokes too, from friends, from my friends, and that was a big part of his life. My dad, he loved performing. He became really an accomplished piano player. I mean, it's amazing. I was just talking with his teacher, Lisa, here. Thank you, Lisa. And my dad had this large repertoire of songs, and then because of strokes, he would forget all those songs, and he would go back and learn them again. He was just that dedicated to the piano. And after I'm done speaking, my brother Paul's going to perform a piece, one of my dad's favorites, Moon River, that my dad used to play. So why are we naming this auditorium after Mr. Ellis? Because of his service here at Roosevelt, which was junior high at the time, and all the plays he put on, such plays as Oklahoma, Finian's Rainbow, South Pacific, Bye Bye Birdie, The Music Man, and The Sound of Music. We were Hello Dolly too, yeah. We were also fortunate as kids, because back then I think schools were a little bit more relaxed. We spent a lot of time here, even during school days. And my dad actually had some of us in his plays. So we got to see firsthand his interaction with his students. And that's where we could really see how much his students revered and respected and loved my dad, because we were right there, part of it. And we never felt like jealous or anything like that. You know, it just, we felt like we were part of the family, and we thank this school district for allowing us to be a part of this family. It was really wonderful. You know, my dad also did a lot of plays with the parks. He did a lot of skits in their summer programs and so forth as well. He also loved to perform skits with his granddaughters and do dress up. And that dress up thing, that was kind of his signature act. At all the plays here at Roosevelt, when the final production went, it's probably like a Sunday afternoon, he would disappear right before the end of the play, and then this woman would come out on the stage, tons of makeup on and really crazy looking dress, and she'd come out all giddy, and she'd end up sitting on the principal's lap at the time and planting a big kiss on his cheek. And that was my dad with his signature act. And he actually did that same thing on his retirement dinner. That principal was there, and he did the same thing to him at the retirement. So after my dad retired, his love for drama and coaching didn't fade. He performed in several plays at St. Catherine's. He coached girls basketball for many years at St. Catherine's, and was eventually inducted into the CYO, which is the Catholic Youth Organization Hall of Fame. And like I mentioned before, he continued his acting at home, right, getting the grandkids involved with plays and skits, and always dressing up with them. You know, as I look back on the life of this wonderful man, I call my dad, I wonder if, since he didn't have the greatest life as a child, maybe his goal in life was to give others a great childhood. He didn't let adversity crush his spirit, and we are all so fortunate to have had him in our lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. I enjoyed hearing that. I'm going to listen to that again and again. As you heard, Mr. Ellis played the piano enthusiastically. He started lessons at age 75. And you heard Lisa is here today. I didn't see where you are, Lisa. Oh, hi. Thank you. I actually have a video of Mr. Ellis playing Moon River on the piano. When he finished playing, and I was starting to stop the camera, he said, "Oh, wait, I have another one." Okay, go ahead. Well, about 5 songs later, I ran out of tape. This is back in tape days. So he loved the piano, and now his son Paul will play Moon River. Thank you, Paul. It was beautiful. Now I would like to introduce Bonnie Coronado, a longtime member of the Board of Trustees of the Lawndale Elementary School District. Bonnie has been our advocate for naming the auditorium after Mr. Ellis from the beginning, and we thank her for her dedicated support. She will conclude her remarks with the formal dedication of Ellis Auditorium.
Hello, and I will not keep you out in this warm weather any longer than I need to. I want to say that Mike is somewhat correct that I was the one who advocated for the naming of this auditorium in memory of Mr. Ellis. But this was an idea that was born months, years prior to his passing. Years and years and years ago, Mr. Goodman would approach me and say, there's been conversations about naming the auditorium after Mr. Ellis. And I would say, well, Al, if that's what you want to do, then you need to come to the board and propose doing that. So with that, I tell you, if there's something you want to do for someone or need to do for someone, I urge you to do it sooner than later. And yes, again, I was the one who was the board president at the time that the committee approached us, but I didn't do this alone. No decision is made by one person alone on the board. It's made by the collective. So I want to thank Kathy Burris, Adim Morales, and Ann Phillips, who are not, Kathy's here, but Adim and Ann are not here. But we would not have been able to have done this without them. So I want to thank them for supporting my suggestion, my proposal, but really, truly, again, I did not do this alone. Okay, so I've been told to read the proclamation. Whereas Mr. Ellis served his country heroically in World War II in the Army Air Corps, taught at Franklin D. Roosevelt from 1961 to 1986, founded the Roosevelt Student Council, student newspaper, and drama club, produced and directed dozens of student plays, inspired a love of physical fitness and sportsmanship in students, instilled humor in all who met him. We therefore dedicate this building as the Ellis Auditorium on this day, November 13th, 2021.
You know, I see a lot of plastic up there. I think I'd rather see something else. How about you? I'd like to ask Julie Ellis Trader and Becky Ellis Connolly to come forward for the reveal. Just slow and steady, Julie. A little more. Isn't that beautiful? It's so appropriate. As you heard from Bonnie, the effort to name this auditorium after Mr. Ellis started quite a while ago. And Mr. Al Goodman, good friend of mine, and former teacher here at Roosevelt, started suggesting it to Bonnie, 3, 4, 5 years ago. After much perseverance, we are finally here today for the dedication. Al worked with Mr. Ellis for 5 years and would like to make a few comments.
Morning. It's so nice of you all to be here for this great celebration. Am I closer up? Oh, you're kidding. I never used a mic in class. This is an important day. This is a man that deserves to be honored and admired. He believed in kids. He believed in the potential of kids. He gave them opportunities and wouldn't stop until they achieved something. He knew how important self-identity was to them. sportsmanship, values. That's what Pete Ellis was about. And that's what impressed me about Pete. When I came in 1969, I was just a rookie. It was my first year here. And yeah, I met Pete on the maybe the baseball field or the basketball court because I like playing basketball. And I watched some of the games. But Pete and I really had very little in common. I taught the big ideas, like Lincoln, Washington, Hamilton, Jefferson, Thoreau. He taught the little ideas, how to be good sportsmen, how to accept defeat with honor, and how to be humble when you're victorious. Those were really important and very difficult concepts to teach kids who are 12, 13, who loved rivalries. And I must say, when kids came into my class after lunch, they were pretty calm. They had just played championship games or intramural games, and I didn't see anyone criticizing. And I knew that was Pete's handiwork, because it was difficult to control. When our kids went over to Rogers, that was a different story. That was a rivalry. And I remember we'd get calls here in the lunchroom. Okay, everyone over to Rogers. There's a riot going on between the two teams. But Pete would never allow any child on his team to berate another child on another team. That was just Pete, his values. One day, Pete did a lot of drama in the auditorium. And I didn't get to see a lot of it because I was teaching. But one day I remember so distinctly, it was 1973 or 4. Jim, was Teresa Ratliff in your class? Okay, so Teresa was in Hello, Dolly. And I was teaching, I don't know, math or history. And the play was over. They had performed in front of the 7th graders. And here comes Teresa, coming in with the biggest smile, interrupted the class, and said, "I did it." And I smiled at her and the confidence that she showed. And I said, "This is Pete's handiwork. This is wonderful." Pete and I were never really friends. I just admired him for his values and his dedication to the kids, which I value very highly. I went over to Rogers because the school the school district had decided there was going to be no more 7th and 8th grade. They closed that up. So a few of us, Mr. Morales, Mr. Chateau, Mrs. Fallis, we went over to different schools, and so I hardly ever saw Pete. What? No? Yeah, I hardly ever saw Pete. But my most, what's the word I want? Joyous times would I be going to district office, going down Freeman or Avis or whatever street, and here comes Pete flying down the street in his bike with a windbreaker right behind him, and the hair just, on his forehead just waving around, and he'd see me. And of course, if Pete says hi to you, you're not going to go past him. I said, "Pete, how you doing?" We stopped the car. And we didn't talk about politics. We didn't talk about school politics. We didn't talk about national events. What we talked about were kids. Whatever happened to Tony Sanchez? He was a great infielder. And Pete would say, "Well, I followed him. We went to maybe El Camino. All right, what about Mike McCoy? Now, that was a talent on the court." And Pete would say, "Yeah," and I kind of lost track of him. So we talk about all these kids. And then suddenly we'd stop talking about kids. There were no more kids we knew in common. And suddenly a smile came over his face. And he said, "Did you ever hear this joke before?" And I said, "No." And I'm not really a fan of jokes at all. It doesn't do anything for me. And he told the joke. And I laughed, gratuitously. But that was my mistake, because once you laughed at one joke, it was an invitation for more jokes, and on and on. And then he'd say, "Al, what am I doing? I have to get home. I'm going, I'm driving, I'm riding my bike to Torrance." And I said, "All right, Pete, it was great talking to you." And I left with a smile on my face. And this happened because I was there 34 years, maybe 8 or 9 times in 34 years. But I remembered every one of those times because it did bring joy to me, even though I kind of pretended I laughed, but I didn't. But it was Pete. in front of a man who was so sincere, who loved joy, loved bringing joy to everyone else. I'll just tell you two more memories. One day, I think I had retired, Pete was retired, and our mutual friend, Ray Morales, who was my best friend in Lawndale, passed away. And that's another story. I delayed seeing him, and suddenly I got the news that he passed away. And I called Pete, because I knew Pete had a relationship with him way before I ever arrived at Roosevelt. And I said, Pete, I got bad news for you. Oh, Al, what's the bad news? I said, Ray Morales just passed away. And he said, oh no, not Ray Morales. I said, yes, I'm sorry to tell you. And then opened up a whole relationship that the two had here. And what he was most proud of was the practical jokes that the two had played on the faculties and different members of the faculties. And then he'd say, yeah, we planned this and it worked, and boy, we got them. We got them. He was so happy and so proud. And we talked for about 2 hours, and I think we were both tired, and we said goodbye. Now, as Bonnie or Mike, I can't remember, had mentioned, that I had thought about doing this. I believe in honoring teachers who dedicate their life and their passion to the kids in whatever community, in this case in Lawndale. Because even though I was at Rogers, kids would come by and they'd start talking about, hey, do you remember Mr. Ellis? You know, he helped me, he guided me when things were bad. And I would hear this through the years. And so I knew this is a place that needed Pete Ellis's name on the auditorium where he performed, had so many performances. So I didn't do anything about it. You know, I'm an idea guy. Ideas are easy. Mike Miller is the engineer. He engineered this whole thing. And I call him the engineer. He is an engineer. But what he did was fantastic. So when Pete passed away, and I looked at the Facebook, all the outpouring of grief, and how they were helped by Pete, how he came to their rescue, and whether he taught them skills or how to cope or anger management or whatever they were so thankful for, I said right there, this is going to be done. And that's when I got Mike and a few other, Mr. James Osborne and Jerry Pease together, and I said, let's go to the board and do this. And we did. We did it, and this is Pete. This is for you. This is what you achieved. You're so well deserved. And for the family, Mike referred to it. 8 kids. I had 1 kid I had a problem being a parent. 8 kids. My God, what must you all have sacrificed with Pete being here? He was here all the time. He was here from morning and to night in the Bodger Park, and went on and on and on. And so to you, we are all grateful for allowing Pete to show his, to have his passion, to complete what he wanted to do in his life. And to the community, this is, again, important to show that there are teachers that are dedicated to the lives of the children in the community. And I'm glad this is happening. I look forward to it, because this is what should be done everywhere, to recognize teachers who, I know teachers who come and go. They've been influential, instrumental, consequential, but they're gone in 2 years. Pete was here for 30, 40, 50 years, at least in Bodger Park. So I forgot to do this, Pete. Can you hold a minute? I usually wear this when I'm out in the sun, but today I got lost in my speech. Pete and I we loved kids and we loved baseball. And of course, Stan the Man Usual was always his Pete's favorite. The sportsmanship, how he played on the field, the humanity, the gentlemanliness of this Stan the Man. And Pete, right now, I hope you are sitting down, regaling him with your jokes. And maybe he can tell you some more about how to teach sportsmanship, which you already know how to teach speech, how to do. So I thank you all for coming, and I wish you well, and go inside. Oh, Mike, that's your job. Thank you.
enjoyed that. And I see a red ribbon here. Anybody want to cut it? How about if we have the 8 Ellis children and Mrs. Ellis come up and do the cutting? So I think because there's so many, they're each going to do a little tiny bit and save the final cut for last. Any other Ellises want to do some cutting? Okay, this is Clinton Ellis. He's done his cut. Mary Ellis. Oh! Have you ever passed by a building with a name on it and you wondered, who is that? Ellis? Who's he? Well, we didn't want that to happen. We decided we wanted everyone to know who he was and why the auditorium was named after him. We put a plaque inside the auditorium, just to the left of the stage, that summarizes his contributions to Roosevelt. We invite you to come visit that plaque. Afterwards, please join us in the outdoor food court for refreshments. Thank you all so much for attending and for honoring Mr. Ellis.